Boss mocked black intern in front of whole floor. Didn't know she was the investor's only daughter. Someone want to explain to me why we're paying for interns who can't even dress for the building they work in. The voice came from the center of the open floor plan, loud enough to reach every desk, every glass partition, every person pretending to look at a screen. It was the kind of voice that knew it was being heard and had decided that was the point. Derek Paulson, managing director of Castellan Capital's New York Equity Division, was standing with his arms crossed beside a printer station, looking at a young woman who had just walked off the elevator carrying a banker's box, a tote bag, and a large coffee she had bought for herself, because nobody at Castellan Capital had told her where the kitchen was. The young woman's name was Zora Osi. She was 22 years old. She was wearing a blazer, pressed trousers, and shoes that she had bought specifically for this internship 3 weeks ago, because she wanted to get it right. Her natural hair was out, not unkempt, not unprofessional, simply her hair, the way it grew from her head, the way it had always grown from her head, the way she had decided, after years of straightening it for other people's comfort, that she was done apologizing for. Derek was looking at her hair. He did not say the word directly. He did not need to. He said dress for the building, and everyone on that floor understood what he meant, and almost no one said anything, and the ones who didn't say anything would carry that silence with them for longer than they expected. Zora looked at him. She set the banker's box on the nearest desk. She straightened her blazer. She did not say a word. What she didn't know, what nobody on that floor knew except one person, was that her father had a meeting scheduled in that building in 11 days. And her father was the reason that building still had a floor to stand on. Nah. He said that in front of the whole floor, out loud, about her hair, on her first week. And she's standing there holding a box and a coffee she bought herself, because no one even showed her where the right kitchen is. We are going to need to back all the way up, because this story starts somewhere very specific, and you need to understand exactly who Zora Osei is before we get to what happened in that conference room. Let's get into it. Kwame Osi came to the United States from Accra in 1991 with a graduate school acceptance letter, a single suitcase, and the specific kind of hunger that has nothing to do with food. He was 26 years old. He had a degree in mathematics from the University of Ghana and a mind that processed numbers the way other people process language, instinctively, quickly, with a kind of pleasure that never fully went away. He enrolled in a financial economics program at a university in New Jersey. He lived in a studio apartment shared with 2 other international students and took a part-time job at a copy center 4 nights a week. He finished his graduate degree in 2 years. He took a junior analyst position at a mid-size asset management firm in Newark. He worked there for 6 years. He learned the architecture of capital markets with the same methodical patience with which he had learned everything else, and he was good at it in a way that made the people above him occasionally uncomfortable, and occasionally grateful, and occasionally both. In 2003, he left the firm. He had saved carefully and borrowed carefully, and partnered with a former colleague named Ama Adjei, and they launched a fund, Osei Adjei Capital, out of a shared office space in Newark with $5 million under management, 2 laptops, and a filing cabinet they had bought used from a law firm that was moving offices. What Kwame understood, and what turned out to be the insight that built everything that followed, was that the infrastructure of mid-size American cities was structurally underinvested and analytically underserved. While the attention of large institutional capital flowed toward coastal markets and high-profile technology sectors, the boring, essential, unglamorous work of financing water systems, transit expansions, affordable housing developments, and municipal energy upgrades in cities like Cleveland and Indianapolis and Memphis and Albuquerque was being done by smaller regional players with limited capital and limited analytical capacity. Kwame saw it differently. He built models, he built relationships. He moved slowly and he moved correctly. And by 2009, when much of the financial sector was on fire, Osei Adjei Capital had a portfolio of the infrastructure debt instruments that were performing quietly and steadily because the water systems and transit lines they had financed were still running, because water systems and transit lines do not stop running during recessions. People still need water. People still need to get to work. By 2015, the fund had grown to $800 million under management. By 2019, it had crossed $2 billion. Kwame Ose was not a household name. He was not on magazine covers. He did not attend the galas and the panels and the keynote stages that generate visibility. He worked, he read, he mentored a small number of young analysts each year, selecting them personally from a list of candidates, spending real time with them, in a way that was unusual for someone managing the capital he was managing. He had 3 rules he told every young analyst he worked with. Understand what you own. Understand what it costs other people when you're wrong. And never let the size of your position make you forget that there are human beings on the other side of every number you write down. He had a daughter. Her name was Zora, and she had her father's eyes and her mother's laugh, and a mind that had been fed on mathematics and literature, and long Sunday conversations at a kitchen table in Montclair, New Jersey, where Kwame and his wife, Adwoa, had raised her and her younger brother in a house where education was not treated as a path to status, but as an obligation to understanding. Something you pursued because the world was complex and complexity deserved your full attention. Zora had grown up watching her father work without understanding, for a long time, the full scale of what he was doing. He did not talk about money at home. He talked about problems. He talked about the logic of a financing structure, the risk profile of a municipal bond, the human geography of a neighborhood, and what it meant for the long-term viability of a transit investment. He talked about it the way a craftsman talks about technique, with precision and with care, but without vanity. She had studied economics and political science at a university in Boston. She had been a serious student, not in a performative way, but in the way of someone who finds the material genuinely interesting, and is annoyed when a course doesn't go deep enough. She had done research for a professor in her junior year on municipal infrastructure financing, and had, near the end of that year, read an academic paper that cited Osei Adjei Capital as a case study in counter-cyclical infrastructure investing. She had come home for Thanksgiving and told her father she had read a paper about his company. He had looked at her over the dinner table and asked her what she thought the paper got wrong. She had answered. He had listened for a long time. Then he had said, "You should work somewhere that challenges you next summer." He had not said, "Work for me." He had said, "Somewhere that challenges you." Because he believed that understanding had to be earned in places where your father's name didn't smooth the path. He had called no one on her behalf. He had not written a letter. Zora had applied to 8 summer internships at financial firms in New York, written 8 cover letters, sent 8 sets of transcripts and references, and been accepted to 2. She had chosen Castellan Capital because they had a desk focused on municipal credit analysis, which was the thing she most wanted to learn. She had told no one at Castellan Capital who her father was. This was not a strategy, it was a principle. She wanted to learn the work on its terms, not on her family's reputation. She had watched her father build something from almost nothing, and she understood that the only way to honor that was to start at the beginning and take nothing for granted. She had arrived at Castellan Capital on a Monday morning in June, carrying a banker's box of supplies because she'd been told to bring her own materials, holding a coffee she'd bought herself because no one had told her where the kitchen was. She had made it off the elevator before Derek Paulson opened his mouth. Derek Paulson had been managing director of Castellan's equity division for 7 years. He was 44 years old, well-dressed in the way that certain financial sector men are well-dressed, expensively, precisely, in a way that communicates membership in a specific world. He was not stupid. He was good at his job in the technical sense. His division had produced consistent returns. His client relationships were stable. His team was functional if not inspired. He was also a man who had operated for 7 years in a position of authority, without anyone above him investing seriously in the question of what he was like to work for, because the numbers were good, and the numbers were what people looked at. His treatment of junior staff was not a secret on the floor. It was an open secret, which is a different thing, the kind of thing that everyone knows, and no one documents, that gets filed under. That's just how Derek is. That HR hears about in exit interviews and marks as a data point but not a crisis. He had a habit of public correction. He had a habit of choosing visible moments for criticism. He had a habit of directing his sharpest comments at the people least positioned to push back. Zora was 22 years old and had been in the building for 90 minutes. She was extremely well positioned for his specific kind of attention. The first week passed with 3 incidents that Zora absorbed without visible response. On Tuesday, Derek handed her a stack of research files and said, in front of 2 analysts who did not look up from their keyboards, "Try not to lose these. They're probably worth more than your scholarship." She did not react. She took the files. She read every one of them that night in her sublet in Brooklyn, made organized notes, and returned them the next morning with a 2-page summary that nobody had asked for, and that her desk supervisor, a junior analyst named Preethi, read with an expression of quiet surprise. On Thursday, Derek passed her workstation while she was on the phone with a data provider and said loudly, to no one in particular, "Is that the intern, or did we accidentally hire someone from a community college?" She finished her phone call. She noted the information she needed. She hung up. On Friday, there was a team lunch for the equity division at a restaurant 2 blocks from the office. Zora arrived on time. Derek looked at her when she sat down and said, "I don't remember approving intern attendance at client lunches." The lunch was not a client lunch. There were no clients present. Preethi, who was sitting next to Zora, said quietly, "It's the team lunch, Derek. It's on the calendar." Derek looked at Preethi for a moment. Then he picked up the menu. Zora ate lunch. She talked to the people around her. She asked a portfolio analyst named James about the municipal credit desk's approach to duration risk, and James, who had not been asked a substantive question by an intern in several years, talked about it for 15 minutes while his soup went cold. After the lunch, Preethi caught up with Zora at the elevator. "You're handling it well," Preethi said. She did not say what it was. She did not need to. "I'm here to learn the work," Zora said. "I'm not going to let him get in the way of that." Preethi looked at her for a moment. "You're going to be okay," she said. It was the first fully warm thing anyone at Castellan Capital had said to Zora since she'd arrived. What nobody in that building knew, including Derek, including Castellan's managing partner, including the division head who was technically Derek's superior, and who had heard 3 of the 4 things Derek said that week and had done nothing, was that Kwame Osi had a scheduled meeting at Castellan Capital's offices in 11 days. The meeting was not small. Castellan Capital had been pursuing an allocation from Ose Aj Capital for 14 months. The pitch had originated with Castellan's managing partner, a man named Richard Howell, who had been introduced to Kwame through a mutual contact at a municipal finance conference. Richard had met with Kwame twice, flown to Newark once, and spent a considerable amount of his own political capital arranging a formal presentation. Ose Aj was not shopping for new managers. Kwame was not easily moved by presentations, but there was a sector alignment between Castellan's emerging infrastructure equity strategy and Ose Aj's evolving allocation model, and Kwame had agreed to a final meeting, which Richard had described to his partners as the most important meeting this office has had in 5 years. The potential allocation was $250 million. The meeting was in 11 days. Zora knew about the meeting in the abstract way that children know about their parents' professional calendars. It was on her father's schedule. She was aware it was significant, and she had not thought about it in connection with her internship. Because she had not thought about her internship in connection with her father at all, she was Zora Ose, summer intern, municipal credit desk. She was there to learn. Those were the only terms on which she was operating. She had not told anyone at Castellan that her last name was her father's last name. Nobody had asked. The second week began with the incident that made everything else irrelevant. Derek was presenting a performance summary to the full equity division. 43 people, gathered in the main conference room with the glass walls that looked out onto the trading floor. The interns were seated along the back wall. Zora had her notebook open. She had prepared for this meeting the way she prepared for everything, thoroughly, quietly, on her own time. Halfway through Derek's presentation, he opened the floor to questions. A junior analyst asked something procedural. Derek answered. Then he looked toward the back wall, the way people look toward something they expect to perform for. And he said, "Anyone else? Any questions from the peanut gallery?" He was looking at the interns. He was specifically looking at Zora. "You," he said, "intern. Since you're here, might as well make yourself useful. What's your read on the duration position in the municipal sleeve?" It was the kind of question senior managers ask junior people when they don't expect an answer. When the point of the question is the asking, not the answering. It was a setup for a joke, or a correction. And everyone in the room knew it, and everyone was watching to see how it landed. Zora looked at him. She looked at her notebook, which she had opened to a page of notes she had made on exactly this topic, because she had read the quarterly reports, and the sector commentaries, and the relevant Federal Reserve guidance on rate sensitivity for municipal credit instruments. And she had formed a view about the duration position because that was what she did when she was given access to information. She spoke for 4 minutes. She talked about the convexity exposure in the long end of the sleeve, the mismatch between the portfolio's average duration and the current rate sensitivity assumptions in the macro model, the historical comparables from the 2018 tightening cycle, and a specific suggestion, framed carefully, deferentially, as a question rather than a recommendation, about whether the team had modeled the scenario in which the Fed's pivot timeline moved out by 2 quarters. When she stopped, the room was quiet. James, the portfolio analyst who had talked about duration risk at the team lunch, was looking at her with an expression that had passed through surprise and arrived somewhere closer to respect. Preethi, at the end of the front row, was looking at her notebook very carefully. Derek was looking at Zora with an expression she could not fully read from the back of the room, but which contained, underneath its controlled surface, something that was becoming urgency. "Interesting," Derek said. The word landed flat. "Where'd you get those numbers?" "From your quarterly reports," Zora said, "and the Fed's June release. They're all on the shared drive." Derek looked at her for a moment longer. "Let's move on," he said. After the meeting, 3 analysts stopped by the back wall to introduce themselves to Zora. 2 of them asked her where she'd studied. One of them asked if she wanted to get coffee and talk about the municipal desk. Derek walked out of the conference room without looking at her. In the hallway outside, he stopped Preethi. "Who vetted that intern?" he said. "HR ran the standard process," Preethi said. "She applied through the university portal." "Who's her family?" Preethi looked at him. "I don't know anything about her family." Derek walked away. That afternoon, he called HR. He asked whether there was anything notable in Zora Osi's application file. HR told him there was nothing unusual. He asked them to double-check the reference letters. HR told him they had already been verified. He hung up. He did not know what he was looking for. He knew only that he had asked a question designed to expose a gap, and instead of a gap he had found a wall, and the wall was well-built and clearly load-bearing. And that bothered him in a way he could not fully articulate, even to himself. He did not ask Zora directly. He did not invite her to the discussion he had that week with the senior analysts about the rate scenario she had raised. He did not acknowledge, in any visible way, that what had happened in the conference room had happened. What he did instead was call the head of the summer intern program into his office and ask that Zora be reassigned to a back-office administrative rotation for broader exposure. The intern program director, a cautious man named Paul, who had spent 8 years at Castellan carefully not acquiring enemies, wrote it up as a development rotation and sent Zora an email explaining that her placement was being diversified. Zora read the email. She looked at it for a while. She went to the back office rotation. She did filing. She did data entry. She organized historical records. She was excellent at all of it because she was excellent at everything she was pointed at. And because she understood, at 22, having grown up watching her father navigate this world, that the way you carry yourself when someone tries to diminish you is the same way you carry yourself when they're trying to elevate you, with your full attention and without apology. She also, on the 3rd day of the back office rotation, sent Preethi an email asking if they could meet for coffee. They met at a place around the corner from the office on a Thursday evening. Preethi had been at Castellan for 4 years. She had watched Derek operate for 4 years. She had never said anything about it formally, because she had calculated the risk and the calculation had consistently come out against her. But she had also kept notes, not a formal record, nothing she'd shared with anyone, just a habit she'd developed after the second incident she'd witnessed that had been filed as nothing. Notes in a document on her personal laptop, dated, detailed, with the names of who had been present. She had 11 incidents logged over 2.5 years. She showed Zora the document on her laptop screen, not because she had a plan, but because she trusted Zora in a way she couldn't fully explain after only 2 weeks, and because she was tired of carrying it alone. Zora read it carefully. She did not ask Preethi what she wanted to do with it. She did not tell Preethi what she herself was going to do. She thanked her. She paid for both coffees. She walked back to the subway and rode home to Brooklyn and sat at the kitchen table in her sublet and thought for a long time. Then she called her father, not to tell him about Derek, not to ask for help. She called him because she called him most Thursday evenings, and because she wanted to hear his voice, and because she knew, without having to say it, that he would ask her the right question. He asked her what she was learning. She thought about the conference room. She thought about the duration analysis. She thought about Preethi's document on a personal laptop. She thought about the back office rotation, which was not about her development. "I'm learning what the numbers look like from different angles," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "Good," he said. "Keep looking." Kwame Osi arrived at Castellan Capital's offices on a Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock. He came alone, as he always did. He wore a suit that was well-made and unremarkable. He carried a slim leather folder. He was brought up to the 42nd floor by Richard Howell himself, who had been waiting in the lobby since 9:45. The presentation took place in the main conference room, the one with the glass walls that looked out onto the trading floor. The same room where, 11 days earlier, Zora had spoken for 4 minutes about duration risk and convexity exposure. While Derek Paulson looked at her with a face he could not control. Richard presented. 2 senior partners presented. Derek presented, because his division was central to the strategy being pitched, and because his 7 years of consistent returns were part of the story Richard was telling. Kwame listened. He asked questions. His questions were specific and precise, and occasionally made the person being asked visibly recalibrate, because his questions came from the same place his models had always come from. A deep structural understanding of what things were actually worth, and why, independent of what anyone needed them to be worth. He asked Derek a question about the duration position in the municipal sleeve. Derek answered. It was a competent answer. It was not a complete answer, and Kwame could see the places where it was not complete, but he did not press. He noted. After the formal presentation, there was a break. Richard brought Kwame coffee. They stood near the windows with the view of Midtown, talking about nothing in particular. A conference they had both attended, a piece of infrastructure legislation moving through the Senate. Then Kwame said, "I should probably mention that my daughter is here somewhere." Richard looked at him. "She's interning, municipal credit. She applied on her own. I didn't know she'd chosen this firm until after she'd already been placed." He said it in the matter-of-fact tone of someone reporting a fact, not asking for anything. "She didn't want me involved, I respect that." Richard processed this for a moment. "Zora Osi," he said. "Yes. She's been here since June." "Yes." Richard was quiet. He was running the calculation that people in his position run quickly, the way they've been trained to. He was thinking about the performance rotation. He was thinking about Derek's request to HR. He was thinking about the back-office reassignment that Paul had written up as a development rotation. He was thinking about whether any of that was documented and what it looked like from the outside. He was thinking about $250 million. He was also, somewhere beneath all of that, because Richard Howell was a man with children of his own, thinking about what it meant that a young woman had spent 6 weeks doing filing and data entry, because a man on his floor had been threatened by the quality of her thinking. "I'd like to meet her, if that's possible," Kwame said. "If she's willing. I know she values her independence here." "Of course," Richard said. His voice was very careful. The call went to Zora's back-office desk at 11:45. It was from Richard Howell's assistant, which was already unusual. The message was that Mr. Howell would appreciate it if she could come to the 42nd floor conference room at noon. Zora put down the file she was organizing. She straightened her blazer. She took the elevator to 42. She walked into the conference room. Her father was standing near the windows. She stopped. She looked at him. He looked back at her with the expression Ad had at the Thanksgiving dinner table when she'd told him what the academic paper had gotten wrong. Attentive, proud in a way he would never say directly, waiting to see what she would do next. She crossed the room and hugged him. Then she stepped back and stood beside him, and they both looked at Richard Howell, who was standing near the conference table with two other senior partners and Derek Paulson. All of them in a row, all of them with the particular stillness of people who are recalibrating in real time. "Mr. Howell," Quam said, "I understand my daughter has been with your team for 6 weeks. I wonder if you could walk me through what she's been working on." Richard looked at Derek. Derek looked at the table. "Okay, I need you to feel what just happened in that room." Kwame didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a speech. He asked one question, and Derek Paulson, who had pointed at his daughter on her first day and questioned her right to be in the building she was already working in, is now standing at the end of a conference table, looking at the floor while the man he has been trying to close for 14 months is standing next to the intern he sent to do filing. But the story doesn't end there. Let's talk about what happened after that question was answered. Richard answered the question honestly. He did not deflect and he did not minimize, because he was too experienced not to know that deflection and minimization in this specific moment would be catastrophic, and because he had spent the last 15 minutes thinking about what had happened on his floor and arriving at conclusions he did not like. He described Zora's placement on the municipal credit desk. He described the conference room presentation. He had heard about it secondhand from James and two other analysts who had mentioned it in passing, and he described it accurately, which meant he described a junior intern who had asked a substantive question about the division's core position in front of 40 people and answered it with institutional-level analysis. He described the reassignment. When he got to the reassignment, he paused. Kwame waited. "That was not the right call," Richard said. "I should have caught it before it happened. I didn't." Derek said nothing. He had the look of a man standing in a room that has changed shape around him. Kwame looked at Zora. "What do you think of their municipal strategy?" he asked her. The way he asked it, you would not have known they were her parents. You would have thought he was a senior investor asking a junior analyst to put their thinking on the table. Zora spoke for 6 minutes. She covered the same ground she had covered in the conference room on her second week, and then she covered more ground. She talked about the convexity exposure in the context of the specific rate scenario the Fed had signaled that morning in a statement released at 10 o'clock, which she had read at her back office desk before the call came through, because she read Fed statements the way other people read the news, because her father had taught her to. When she was done, one of the senior partners, a woman named Claire, who had been at Castellan for 12 years, and had said nothing during the conference room presentation because she had not been invited to it, looked at Zora, and then looked at Richard, and then looked at the window in a way that meant several things at once. Kwame looked at Richard. "She should be on your credit desk," Kwame said. "Not in back office administration." "Agreed," Richard said. He said it without hesitation. Derek cleared his throat. Kwame looked at him. It was the first time he had looked directly at Derek since he'd entered the room. It was a brief look, professionally neutral, and it communicated clearly and completely what Kwame's position was without requiring a single word. Derek sat down. "I owe your daughter an apology," Derek said. His voice was careful. It had the flatness of words that are being chosen because they are necessary, not because they are wanted. "I made her first weeks here harder than they needed to be. I was wrong to do that." The room was quiet. Zora looked at Derek for a moment. She did not perform forgiveness, and she did not perform coldness. She was simply present, standing in a conference room on the 42nd floor of a building, where someone had tried to make her smaller and had not succeeded. "Thank you," she said. 2 words. She did not add anything. She did not need to. Kwame Osi did not withdraw from the Castellan Capital discussions. He was a careful man, and careful men do not make consequential decisions in emotional moments. He told Richard Howell that he needed 2 weeks to review what he had learned about the firm's culture and management practices before completing his evaluation. He said this in the same tone he used for every professional conversation, measured, direct, without malice. Richard spent those 2 weeks doing something he should have done 6 years earlier. He commissioned a formal review of Derek Paulson's management conduct. He gave the HR director a specific mandate, not a complaint-by-complaint review, but a pattern analysis. He asked for the exit interview records from the previous 4 years. He asked for the incident logs. They found 7 documented incidents. They found 22 exit interview references to management climate on Derek's floor. They found Paul's email about Zora's reassignment and the back-channel request to HR that had preceded it. They found Preethi's request for a transfer to a different division, submitted 3 weeks earlier, which had been sitting in Richard's inbox, and which he had not yet read. Derek Paulson was placed on administrative leave 6 days after the Kwame OC meeting. He resigned 12 days after that. The resignation was presented internally as mutual and voluntary. It was not voluntary. Preethi's transfer request was not just granted, she was promoted into the senior analyst role that Derek's departure had opened. Because Claire, who had been quietly watching her work for 2 years, used the opening to do what she had meant to do, for longer than she would admit. Kwame OC's final decision on the Castellan capital allocation came 3 weeks after his visit. He allocated $150 million. Not the full $250 million he had been approached about, but a significant and real commitment, with a documented expectation of a review in 18 months. His letter to Richard Howell included one paragraph that was not standard investment correspondence. It said that the quality of an institution was visible in how it treated the people with the least power in it, and that what he had observed at Castellan gave him reason for both concern and cautious optimism, and that the cautious optimism rested entirely on the changes he had seen happen quickly, once the right people decided to make them. Richard framed the letter. He hung it in the conference room, not his office. The conference room, the one with the glass walls. Zora OC returned to Castellan Capital the following summer. Not as an intern. Richard had called her in April, 6 months after her first summer, with a structured proposal, a 2-year analyst position on the municipal credit desk, reporting to Claire, with a specific portfolio of coverage responsibilities and a review at the 18-month mark. The offer was not inflated. It was the same offer a 2nd-year analyst with her profile would receive. She had asked for a week to think about it. She had taken 4 days. She was at her desk on the municipal credit desk on a Tuesday morning when her phone rang. It was her father. "How's the first week?" he said. "It's good," she said. "The model they're using for the Illinois Muni sleeve has a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Structural. The correlation assumptions are stale. I'm writing a note." He was quiet for a moment. "Send it to me when you're done," he said. She sent it that Friday. It was 8 pages, clean, well-sourced, with 3 exhibits. He read it over the weekend and replied with 2 comments and 1 question, the same way he had responded to her work since she was 19 years old, and had first shown him an economics paper she was proud of. His question was, "What would you need to test this properly?" She answered on Sunday night. She was already at 23, thinking the way her father thought, not about what things were worth to the people who owned them, but about what they were worth to the systems they moved through, and what those systems owed the people they were supposed to serve. 3 years later, Zora OC left Castellan Capital to join OC Adjay Capital as a junior partner. The announcement was 1 paragraph. It described her background and her transition, and said she would be focusing on municipal infrastructure credit origination in the Southeast. James, the portfolio analyst who had talked about duration risk until his soup went cold, sent her a congratulations email. He said he had told the story of her conference room presentation to every intern who had come through the floor since that summer, specifically because he wanted them to understand that doing the work was the thing, that showing up knowing the material was the only protection that actually held. Preethi sent a bottle of Ghanaian palm wine to her new office with a card that said 3 words. "I knew it." On the day Zora's name appeared on the Osei Adjay Capital website as junior partner, Kwame Osei was in his Newark office. Same building, different suite, bigger windows now. He was in a meeting when his assistant knocked and handed him a printed copy of the website update. He looked at it. He set it on the corner of his desk. He finished his meeting. After the meeting, he walked to the window. He looked at the city. He thought about the studio apartment in the early 90s. The 2 other students, the copy center, on 4 nights a week. He thought about the $5 million under management in 2003, the laptop, and the used filing cabinet. He thought about the years when the work was quiet and the results were right. And nobody wrote about it because infrastructure debt in mid-size. American cities is not the kind of thing that gets written about. He thought about Zora at 22, on her first day at a building where someone had decided she didn't belong. holding a banker's box and a coffee she'd bought herself. Standing there without saying a word, he picked up the phone and called her. She picked up on the second ring. "I see they updated the website," he said. "I approved it this morning," she said. "Your grandfather would have liked it," he said. The man never stopped working either. She laughed. It was her mother's laugh, quick and warm and completely full, the laugh of someone who has been given a lot of reasons to use it. "How does it feel?" he asked. She thought about the conference room. She thought about Preethi's document on a personal laptop. She thought about the back office rotation, the filing, the data entry. She thought about standing in a room on the 42nd floor while a man sat down. "Like the numbers worked out," she said. He laughed. "They usually do," he said, "if you build them right." "All right. All right. I need a second." Because Zor sat in that back office rotation doing filing, she could have called her father on day one. She could have ended the whole thing in a phone call. But she didn't, because that was never why she was there. She was there to learn the work. And the work is what saved her. Not her last name, not her family's fund, not a rescue. The work she had done since she was old enough to sit at a kitchen table and listen to her father talk about what numbers mean. And Derek Paulson is out here somewhere, knowing that the intern he sent to organize historical records is now a partner at the fund he spent 14 months trying to close. I want to hear from you. This story is fiction, but the room on the second week is real. The moment where someone with less formal power walks into a conference room and shows the work, and the room goes quiet. That is a real moment that happens everywhere, every day, and it matters what the witnesses in that room do next. James introduced himself. Preethi kept notes. Claire used an opening to do what she'd meant to do for 2 years. Who showed up for you when you were the new person in a room that wasn't sure about you? Or, and this one is harder, when were you the witness and what did you do? Tell me. Drop it in the comments. If this story hit something real for you, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe if you haven't. We're here every week with a new story, and until next time, do the work, let it speak. The numbers don't lie about who built them.